Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're right at 10 o'clock, so I think it's probably best that we get started. I'm Salethia Bell, Assistant Director in our Student Financial Management Center here at Georgia State. This morning, we have the privilege of actually having a presentation. It's actually several. It's going to be 3 individuals that are going to assist us. One exciting feature is that they are all from one of our mentee institutions, Florida International. So this is very, very exciting for us. Flavio Carrillo is a faculty administrator in the College of Business at Florida International University. As a finance instructor, Flavio teaches financial management, corporate finance, commercial banking, and serves as faculty administrator or advisor to the college's Students Managed Investment Fund, which is SMIF. As director of Capital Markets Lab and senior director of the SunTrust Financial or Florida International University or Financial Literacy Clinic, Flavio is involved in the development and implementation of the lab's financial literacy curriculum. Flavio holds a master's degree in music from the University of Miami. He also holds an MBA and a Master of Science of Finance from Florida International University. He will be pursuing a doctorate in business administration at the University of Florida in the fall. Flavio was born in Los Angeles and he was raised in Miami, Florida. We also have a co-presenter. Catherine Graw is the program manager for the SunTrust Florida International University or Financial Wellness Clinic. She is the lead instructor for financial literacy workshops that are delivered to various student groups at Florida International University. Catherine manages a team of student assistants and SunTrust fellows who work in the community to prepare high school students for today's competitive job market. This involves researching innovative ways to effectively integrate contemporary financial strategies within classroom discussion and by merging conceptual basis with a hands-on approach. This is to enhance student learning while encouraging creativity and innovation in financial decision-making. She will be receiving an MBA with a concentration in business analytics from Florida International University at the end of July. Also, Carla Hernandez is in the Corporate Relations Division. So it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to individuals that will be presenting. And again, they are from one of our mentee institutions. So without further ado, I welcome the team from Florida International University.
Thank you so much, everyone. We're very happy to be here. Let me see. Okay, let's see if I know how to work this. Yay, okay. My job here is done. Again, my name is Carla Hernandez, and I head up corporate relations for FIU in Miami, Florida. And I have the distinct pleasure of working with our colleagues at SunTrust Foundation and being involved in this initiative. It's now been 2 years that we've been working with the SunTrust Foundation in this particular grant, and we're very excited of the outcomes that we have seen at the university. I know a lot of our leadership, including our president, President Rosenberg, is very, very excited of the work that Flavio and Kathy and the SunTrust Fellows have been doing within our university, but also within our community. Obviously, the city of Miami and our, areas around the city, it's one of the poorest areas in the country. As you may know, we have a huge immigration population, so financial literacy is something that is very looked for and searched for and needed in our community. So having this clinic is like a gem, and I know an answer to many community members around Miami, Florida. So wanted to give you guys a very quick snapshot of FIU by the numbers. It's interesting to go around the country and represent the university. When they start seeing what the numbers look like, they think, you know, we're an older institution, obviously have been around a while. We are not. We were founded in 1965 as a 2-year institution. In 1969, we became a 4-year institution. So not a very, you know, older established university. We are the 4th largest university in the country. R1 classification, so high research classification, have been able to accomplish a lot in a short period of time. We have 56,000 students as of right now. It is expected by 2020 that we will have 65,000 students, is what our provost tells us. 93% of our student body are minorities. It's a huge influx. We're a minority-majority institution. As you'll be able to see on the right, the majority coming from the Hispanic population. Obviously, in Miami, we have an ongoing influx of immigrants coming into our town, and they stay in Miami, they study and they work there, and FIU definitely is, you know, an entity and has always been an entity of preparing this immigrant population for better jobs and better opportunities, you know, in the United States. We have 89% of our full-time freshmen that come in every year that identify with financial need. So we do have a huge influx of financial need among our undergraduates. 74% of the student body that walks around our campuses are undergraduate, so we have a huge influx of that. And then 50% of undergraduates receive a Pell Grant. So the story of first-generation students is huge on our campus. We have, in addition to the 93% minorities overall, 93% of our first-generation students, you know, need some type of financial aid. So not only is the need high, but obviously the opportunity for this clinic is in the right place. It's in the right location. Obviously, just within the walls of the institution, it is much needed. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Professor Carrillo, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the clinic.
Thank you, Carla. One second. So thank you so much all for coming. We're so excited to be here. And you know, when I was coming in yesterday, flying here from Miami, I wasn't quite sure what the conference was going to deliver to us. We know what it's about, but we've all attended multiple conferences everywhere, and so usually we leave a conference and we're like, you know, we forget some of the stuff that was actually mentioned at the conference. We remember other things. We pick up on a few things that we may actually want to implement ourselves because we feel that there's good use for that. But we mostly leave conferences and you know, forget about it after a few months perhaps. And what I experienced yesterday here was something magical. What is happening at GSU is something that is really transforming lives. And I feel so at home here at this university, even though I've only been here. This is my second day here, like most of you probably. Because as you saw from Carla's presentation, our student body is very similar to the student body here. In fact, earlier today, a gentleman out here was helping me. And it's this gentleman right here. And the first thing he said to me is, you know, he works here, but he's a graduate of FIU from Miami. So he's a product of FIU. And so GSU, for me, for us, for Kathy, for Carla, is a place that feels really familiar. It's a place that is similar not just in the structure, but also in what your student body looks like, the challenges that they face, and obviously the dreams, the hopes that many of these students, you know, carry. I want to thank a few people also. I want to thank SunTrust, from the SunTrust Foundation, Stan Little. We met with him for the first time last week. He traveled to Miami, and we shared with him our vision and what we're doing, and he actually spoke about what's happening here in Atlanta, and specifically about GSU. And yesterday it all clicked. We realized, wow, this is something, transformative. This is something that is impactful. It's a different approach to what we're doing over in Miami, but it's definitely an approach that works. The data obviously, states that it's actually working wonderfully as well, and it's something that we would like to collaborate with GSU and perhaps implement to a certain degree even within our community. So I want to thank Stan Little for not just coming down to Miami and meeting us, but also introducing us to GSU. When we first reached out to SunTrust Foundation and we asked them for support because we had a vision, we had a very receptive audience, and we were very excited about that. And then our students did the rest. They basically presented, and I think that those involved that day, Margaret Callahan, who is with SunTrust, and others. Eventually, we met with Mark Chansey, and as well, and the previous foundation president, David Fuller. And what we had was an idea that we felt strongly would help support, help develop, and lift many in our community. And SunTrust actually not just told us it's a good idea, but also supported us. And for us to have been given that opportunity of actually being able to make this dream into a reality and actually roll up our sleeves and go into the schools and work with our internal community and do what is necessary in order for us to execute this plan was incredibly important. We're going to talk a lot about what we're doing in South Florida shortly, and Kathy will share with you some of the statistics that we have, and especially when it comes to peer teaching, near-peer teaching. But I want to also talk about, generally the 4 areas that we are working with. First of all, we're dealing with the internal community. So we have an internal FIU student population. You're 52,000 or so, we're 57,000. We're very similar. As you can see, we're predominantly Hispanic, 60%, yet 93% of our student body is, they're minorities, right? Of those, most of them work. In fact, Carla and I were having a conversation yesterday, and she mentioned to me, do you know that we only, for a school of 57,000 students, we only have 5,000, basically, beds for students. So we are a commuter school. I'm assuming you were a commuter student. 3 jobs. And so as a commuter school, we have challenges that are unique to us. Many of our students have to work, right? Yesterday, it was more than proven that finances do get in the way. And obviously, students may not have an opportunity, time to actually devote, to spend in actually, achieving their academic goals. And I want to share something with you that is also, for me, personal. Yesterday, many of us, obviously, we're human beings, and we forget sometimes the struggles that our students go through at times to actually go to class. And I had a student who was actually sending me a few emails. He was not happy with the grade he received in one of my classes, specifically the Student Managed Investment Fund, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly as well. But he was not happy, even though he did the work, but he didn't really go to class that often. And I was, I forget sometimes, and I think we all in this room forget sometimes that, just because we may not necessarily be in that situation at this point of our lives, others are. And so, yesterday, I reached out to the student has been sending me a few emails, very polite, asking me, if I would reconsider that he did all the work that he presented at the final presentation to the advisory board, that if I need to speak to others in the group. And yesterday, I just sent him an email after the conference, and I said, tell me about last semester and the jobs that you held. Were you working? And I got an email within 10 minutes. And he said, I held 2 jobs during your class, during the semester. And I worked till 6:30 p.m. And and then on Thursday evenings, which is the day that my class is held, I asked permission to leave early. But if you have ever been to Miami, we have awful traffic. I'm sure the traffic in Atlanta, it's probably no better. This is my second day in Atlanta. But traffic is awful. So he was actually arriving late after I had taken attendance. And so yesterday, I realized that, wow, these students, it's really not his fault. So we serve the internal community, the FIU internal community. We provide basic financial literacy. We're definitely not using, at least not to the level that is being utilized here, data analytics to help dictate how we work with our students. This is something that I think is phenomenal, an eye-opener, and something that we definitely should be doing also at FIU. And for our internal community, it's basic financial literacy courses, student debt. Yesterday at the dinner, I believe it was Stan who mentioned that the worst thing, worse than graduating, or worse than not graduating from college, is not graduating with debt. And many of our students are unaware that student debt actually will impact you for the rest of your life. You can actually be carrying that student debt forever. And how many of our kids, and the beautiful thing about GSU and FIU is that we do deliver an affordable education to students, but how many kids have we met that may not have had perhaps the proper guidance at home as far as decision making is concerned, career decision making? I was one of those, and I'll share that story with you a little later today. But that they've perhaps studied an area that they had a passion for, which is fine, it's beautiful, but perhaps they went to a school where they had to, unfortunately, ask for a significant amount of student loans, and now they leave with a degree that is perhaps not as useful as they thought it may have been, and they're straddled with enormous amounts of student debt. And that happens way too often in our country. So what we're trying to do within the clinic as well is make sure that we address this, and that students, when they make these decisions, are aware of the ramifications of these decisions. Of course, budgeting, right? Credit card debt. We have 2 Starbucks on campus. And I'm always surprised, not that I'm against Starbucks, I like coffee too, but when you're a student on a budget and you go to Starbucks often, even as adults, when we go to Starbucks, how many of you have actually been a little bit surprised or appalled at the actual bill and the more extravagant the name of the drink that you're asking for, the greater the price, right? The higher the price. And so therefore, these are the types of conversation. And I think, yesterday that was actually also addressed, where many times, too often, our students are not thinking ahead, right? So GSU meets with students and say, perhaps you should actually consider staying at home and not being in a dorm here at the university because you will run out of money. And sometimes these are the conversations that we need to have also, and we have with our internal community. So we deliver workshops on a regular basis on a series of topics that actually interest the students, and hopefully we will, emanate some light into the subject, and they can actually go ahead and make changes that can actually be lifelong, which would have lifelong ramifications. Externally, as Carla mentioned earlier today, our community, South Florida, is comprised of many different municipalities, and I don't know how many cities, like 20-something cities. It's incredible. When you think of Miami, but Miami is actually just a little place. The city itself is just, expanded. In the west, we have the Everglades, so pretty much stops there. And then it's just going from south to north and scattered within many different municipalities. But there's a uniqueness about Miami that, you and I were speaking about earlier today, and that's the fact that Miami is prohibitively expensive, especially when it comes to real estate, especially when it comes to rent. And so our students face that unique challenge as well. But not just our students, also the external community. We've worked, and we've reached out to 2 different municipalities in the city. One of them is the city of Opa-locka. We had a meeting a few weeks ago with a group of small business owners, and we asked them, what can we do to help you? How can FIU, SunTrust help you succeed? Because if you succeed in your community, the whole community will actually blossom. And that would actually ripple. There will be a ripple effect, and everybody will be touched. The other city that we're engaging is the city of Miami Gardens. Miami Gardens has the terrible notoriety of actually having the worst crime rate in the state of Florida. It's actually the murder capital of Florida. Not Miami, the murder capital of Florida. And so we actually reached out to them as well, and we're saying, what can we do to work within the community with the small businesses and help them actually succeed, again, so that others can follow as well and inspire, something that was mentioned yesterday too, others to do similar, to actually do something similar. Finally, we also work with the high school in our area. Miami is unique in one respect. While inequality in education exists throughout the nation, in Atlanta as well, in Miami as well, we have an influx of immigrants into our schools that does not cease. It's actually getting, the problem is actually exacerbating at this point. In the 1960s, as many of you know, we had the first wave of Cuban migrants that were actually escaping a totalitarian regime. In the late 70s, 1979, you had a revolution in Nicaragua, and you had in the early 80s an influx of Nicaraguans coming into our community, and I don't need to tell you about what's happening in Venezuela at this point. And we see these students, and these students are actually coming into our schools. So not only will they be first-gen students when they reach colleges, but they also face a daunting task of actually adapting, assimilating, learning a new language, integrating into a society that is totally foreign to them. And this is what we face in Miami. So when we go into the high schools, and I will elaborate on that a little bit later, we're trying to start earlier. We're trying to actually help these students integrate into society, making sure that they are aware of their financial literacy choice or financial literacy actions and aware of the consequences. And for those that are interested in perhaps pursuing a career in the discipline of business, we're going to help them a little further. And I'll share with you my philosophy on that. What I would like to do next is show you a very short clip of one of the schools that we engage in South Florida, and the impact that we're having within that specific school. Subsequently, Catherine Grau will speak about the effect of peer teaching of when we send our SunTrust fellows, similar to the ambassadors here at GSU, and how they relate to the high school students and how we're better able to actually address them and reach them. So if we could show the video at this point, I would truly appreciate it.
As the Academy of Finance lead teacher here at Gables, I'm so happy to be able to bring this program to my students. We were very pleased to be chosen as one of the schools to work with FIU through the SunTrust grant, and the kids have received them very well. I think it's been a great experience for them because they've learned a lot about financial literacy through the Excel, and so it's helped them build their financial knowledge as well as their Excel skills.
I think it's great that we have the SunTrust FIU Financial Wellness Clinic. It really has allowed us to really engage the students in a different way because of the way it's structured in the classroom. Most classrooms are a lecture type style, but in the SunTrust FIU Financial Wellness Clinic, it's much more of a communal learning. We have people doing teamwork, building on the Excel skills. They can ask a lot of questions. It's much more interactive than a typical classroom.
I'm going into science, but in my resume, for example, look good that, oh, she's also informed in like the accounting aspects and she's informed in the business views of it as well. So it's not like, okay, she's just a psychologist, we'll throw her in to be a psychologist. No, she can also attack these tasks as well.
I think one of the great things about this program and being able to be on this platform and teach these students is the Excel-based learning that they're getting. Being able to be exposed to such a critical business skill at such a young age, it's just life-changing.
So hopefully in the future, if I get my CPA license, there's a lot of fields that I can enter just with having that license. It's really important to have that because you understand everything, not just from accounting, but also in an economic perspective, and you just broaden your eyes.
I think it's a wonderful idea that it's being taught by young students who are actually graduating from the School of Business, because it's given them an opportunity to relate to these young students and envision themselves in the future. Many of our students will be attending FIU and many of them will be studying business. And they've also built on the knowledge that we teach them here in the Academy of Finance at Coral Gables Senior High School and develop their computer skills. So it's been just a great opportunity.
It's very encouraging as a student to see these young minds like really be inspired by these financial concepts, really have an interest and try to learn more, how they try to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me messages for mentorship, and I really do appreciate that opportunity to really be able to give back to the community.
Thank you for playing that. Daniel Ottenwalder is actually an excellent example of one of our SunTrust fellows. We're lucky to have a team of about 3 to, in the future, 6 SunTrust fellows who will be working alongside Flavio and I on our financial literacy programs. But Daniel was one of our first hires, and he is exceptional for many reasons. He is, similar to us, a first-generation student. He is a student that started at a 2-year institution, and a lot of us know the challenges that come from transferring from a 2-year institution to a 4-year institution, and he navigated a lot of those challenges on his own without a lot of familial resources or support. And as a result of that, he started a financial literacy organization. On his own, he recruited some of his friends to help in this endeavor, and they worked with middle school students. And he did this outside of being a full-time college student, holding a part-time job, working at a grocery store, and also working on this extracurricular activity, serving the community, to impose some of the things that he learned, some of the resources that he picked up on a younger generation. And it was because of his initiative to take on that task that we found out about him and were able to bring him on board and pay him for his work working in the community. And it was really a privilege for us to have him on our team. And like I said, he's exceptional for many reasons. And one being that right before he came on board to work with us, he had actually sat and took the CFA Level 1. And if any of you know about any finance designation, you know that that's an extremely challenging examination, and it was typically professionals sit for it after they graduate from undergrad, and he did it as a college student. So it's really an incredible advantage that he gave to himself to set himself up for a career in finance, but also for us, that we had an opportunity to send someone of his caliber out into the community to work with our own high school students. And by all intents and purposes, he is an expert. And a student like him is really, I'd like to say 1 in a million, but we have seen a growth in students, undergraduate students at FIU who have expressed an interest and who have sat for the CFA level 1. And we are very fortunate in that regard. And also exceptional because he is really easy to work with in the schools. Like, he is able to interact with the students love him, and as he said, he's welcome to being a mentor, serving in a mentor capacity for these students, and he has over 500 LinkedIn connections, a lot of which I'm sure are from his work in the community. And another very, very interesting thing about him that we're very proud to share with you is, as a consequence of his work in the community and all of the tools and things that he has accomplished on his own, he was able to start, and as of this month, he took on a role at SunTrust, Robinson Humphreys, the investment banking arm of SunTrust, as an investment banking analyst. So we're very excited about that, and this was someone that prior to entering FIU and prior to finding a love and admiration for the accounting discipline was really looking at a career in retail management. And he really has given himself an opportunity, like Brian was saying yesterday, to have more life choices, have more opportunities. And he did this really out of his own fruition and out of his own initiative. And we were really, truly privileged to have him on our team. And he's an excellent example of a near-peer teacher. So I wanted to use this stat. We know a lot about the high school dropout rates. We know a lot about the college dropout rates and how that tends to be a consequence of not having financial support to be able to continue paying for your college coursework. And it's actually one of the reasons that we work at the SunTrust Clinic so closely with our first generation students, because we understand that our population specifically does have to maintain a full-time job and for the most part, and a lot of the times even just a part-time job can be really taxing on them. And for high school students, as Flavio mentioned, we do a lot of work in the high schools, and this statistic from the Department of Education is important because it shows that student engagement at a high school level is really critical to their chances of continuing their education. So we like to think a lot about what the likelihood is that students will drop out in college. We also have to consider that naturally high schools are a feeder into college, and a lot of our students 31% aren't graduating. And this was a statistic that was also found in support of the flipped classroom model. We use a somewhat similar approach to the flipped classroom model in that we really focus a lot on experiential learning, on pragmatic skill building. So while we go into the high schools, we go into the classrooms, and we take up actual class time. And we're very fortunate that we have a lot of support from Miami-Dade County Public Schools to allow us and our peer teachers into the classroom during classroom time to deliver the content that we have developed. And in doing that, we have to have a combination of lectures and hands-on experiential learning. So we don't have the benefit of just going in and playing on Excel, even though we find that it is one of the favorite activities for our students. And as we mentioned, we send our near-peer teachers, our near-peer facilitators into the community to deliver this content. But we also have to ensure some accuracy. We can't just have them create the curriculum and send them out without making sure that what they are delivering, it holds up to what we want the community, the students, to learn. And so we start in this hierarchy at the top with the subject matter experts, and we develop the curriculum typically dependent on the group that we're working with. So for the high schools, we have a curriculum that is going to be relevant to them, to the high school students, and the objectives that we're trying to meet. And we do that primarily with Flavio, with a collaboration of faculty in the College of Business to develop this proprietary material and then deliver it to the community through our SunTrust fellows, also under our supervision. And in the high schools, there's always a teacher involved, so that our students don't have to be concerned about classroom management per se. They just have to be worried about engaging the students, connecting with them, delivering content that is going to be relevant and important for them to learn. And one of the great things for us, one of the great advantages for us of having the SunTrust Fellows is that once we have established what the learning outcome is, the SunTrust Fellows sort of take a deep breath, take a step back and think about how they like to learn, how they've learned this material, and they're able to develop really cool PowerPoints and decks with some technology that maybe we're not up to speed on always, because we like to brush up on our skills, but you know, sometimes this newer generation knows a lot about how to make things snazzier, make things more attractive, and that's really another benefit for us to work with them. And then they trickle that information, that content down to the different groups that we work with. And they primarily work with the high school students and the FIU community. So we do have sessions, as you saw the picture of the SunTrust clinic. I'll show that to you. We'll see it again later. We do have sessions in that space for our community and the community that we'll be working with in the municipalities. This is an example of the finance module. I won't go in depth over this, but just so you have an idea of what we cover, we have 8 sessions, and like I said, we have a lot of support from the public schools to allow us to be in the classroom for 8 different sessions. And this is an overview of what we cover, and also keep in mind that for every one of these sessions, we have an integrated Excel model to convert that theory into practice. So the students have an opportunity to really practice what we preach, essentially. And these are some of the examples of actual SunTrust fellows that we've had, and some of the key takeaways about what makes them so special. We focus a lot of our attention, because with great power comes great responsibility, right? So we want to make sure that the students that we send out into the community are the cream of the crop, are students that are dependable, and are students that are that have accountability and some legitimacy to the things that they say. And so we're very thorough about who we select, and our interview process includes having them teach us something. Because someone can be great on paper, they can have all of the credentials that we seek, and we've seen that multiple times before, and unfortunately when they stand in front of the classroom, or even when they stand in front of just Flavio and I, that doesn't translate. And that's really important when you're working with really anyone, as we know, trying to convey an important message. We want them to be effective communicators. These are the schools that we work with. As Flavio mentioned in our agreement, we have a 3-year agreement. We started off the first year. We've spent a lot of our time developing the curriculum, working on building out the space where we would have our guests. And we look forward to increasing the schools that we work with. And with increasing the schools that we work with, we will also be increasing the number of fellows that we hire. And I also want to point out that there is a benefit for the fellows to have a paid job, a paid work experience working for us. And it looks great on their resume, it's great for us, and it's a really great opportunity for them. These are some of our impact numbers as we've grown, actually this is another one of our SunTrust fellows, and you can see this is a good image of what our space looks like and actual work. This is an event that we had with high school students where we also invite them to the space. So it's not only us participating with them in the community, but they also have an opportunity to come on to a college campus and have that experience of working in our space with our students and feeling what it would be like to come to FIU or come to any college campus, and it's a really good motivator, we think, for them to continue working on their education. These are some strategies for implementation, things that we find are essential in our success. And we start with our strategic partnerships and our donors, and it really, as Flavio mentioned, we couldn't do it without the support of SunTrust, and that's while we're very grateful, it's not trying to give them a big head, it's really true. Not only from a fiscal perspective, but also just from an experience and from being a partner that connects us, for instance, to our mentee schools like GSU, and we have an opportunity to be here and connect with you all through them. And so they're not a silent partner, which is really helpful. The programmatic feasibility, this is really about, as I've mentioned several times, Miami-Dade County Public Schools and how they have been really supportive, and we also could not do it without them allowing us access to these students during class time in order to be able to deliver this content. And they also have to have, we're very respectful of the curriculum that they have in place currently, but they also have to have some humility and understand that there are some gaps, there are some opportunities to supplement the skills that they're teaching the students. And also we work with teachers. So we do have sort of teacher training programs where the teachers come to the campus and we work with them to introduce them to the curriculum, because they are our first line of defense. So that we want them to be aware of what we're teaching the students, so when we're not there, they're able to deliver that content as well. And they're our biggest partner too, the teachers. And visiting peers must exhibit cultural competence. This is huge. And as Flavio mentioned, a lot of our students, being first-generation students and being typically from immigrant backgrounds, being immigrants themselves, have just an inherent cultural acceptance to them. But we do find that it's very important for them to be able to work from through multiple spectrum of education or privilege, if you will. And because we do engage prep schools, and we do work a lot in the inner cities, and they have to have that flexibility throughout. And we've seen really incredible instances where they have been able to manage difficult situations, difficult students that aren't as engaged as we would ideally like them to be. And it's really spectacular to witness, even some of our more reserved students, their ability to face that challenge and face that difficulty is really impressive and makes us really proud, actually. And wide-scale implementation. One of the things that Flavio will mention later is our work and our partnership with NAF. And what we hope for is, while we're working and seeing some success working in Miami-Dade County specifically, is being able to develop that throughout the nation, and how that's going to be impactful in the long run, and how we're going to be able to implement the successes that we've had with near-peer teaching across the board, which is one of the reasons that we're here having this conversation with you all, so you can see what we do, how it works for us, and how we've really, from an operational perspective, been able to implement this model of learning facilitation and just engagement. So with that, we'll move on to Flavio's closing statements.
Thank you, Kathy. I don't need the microphone. So I want to share with you a little personal story. And I was a first-generation student, and that had a profound impact in how I actually view our student body and how I actually engage them as well. I had a terrible experience in a specific class in high school. It was a math class. It was not a pretty experience. I'm sure we've all had experiences in life, especially when we were younger, where we were ill-equipped at the time to handle with the adversity presented by that difficult situation. And in my case, I remember it was actually a math teacher that was actually condescending, loved to humiliate students in class, and basically had a very, it was a fearful environment that persisted throughout the classroom. I think that many of us have actually been in situations like that, where we have been, belittled, or perhaps we have been, exposed to humiliation as well. First-gen students face a lot of adversity, but a difficult learning environment shouldn't be one of them. And what happens when this is occurring is learning ceases at that moment. And we just put on the brakes. We're no longer inspired. We no longer want to continue. We just want the time to end. We just want that bell to ring when we were in high school and for that session to end. And something dramatically happened. I was lucky enough to, as it was mentioned earlier, my first couple degrees were actually not in business or in finance, they were actually in music. And so at 15, I had an opportunity of actually enrolling at the University of Miami and be a dual enrollment student. And so I was going to high school, yet at the same time, I was actually taking college classes. So my first day in music theory class at the college level was quite intimidating. But my experience was a very different one. While I was totally lost that first day or that first week, I had an instructor that realized that I was lost and reached out to me and said, why don't we meet regularly after class and I can help you. And what I learned at that moment was that without a solid foundation, you see, my colleagues in the classroom who were actually older than me, they were in that room with me, but they had a foundation that I did not have. They had a basic understanding of those building blocks of music theory that I was unaware of. So when new information was being presented, they were able to assimilate it. They were able to basically connect the dots. I was not. Thanks to this professor, I was able to catch up. I didn't do too well that first semester. I actually got a B. But I was able to successfully complete the course. Subsequently, I took the Music Theory 2, 3, and 4, and I did very well in those. I did get A's in those classes. But I realized at that moment, at a young age, that it was that foundation that I was missing that was necessary in order to be able to continue connecting those dots and building upon something. And so therefore, I realized that math class that was so intimidating and that I didn't want to walk into, it was not about me. It was about the environment. It was about the fact that I was unprepared to deal with that. As a first-gen student, my parents wanted the best for me. But they, too, their help was limited. They weren't able to offer me advice beyond what they themselves perhaps had experienced. So I learned something valuable very young in life, and it's, how is it that Flavio learns? And subsequently I graduated, and I had an opportunity of teaching music for the first 8 years of my career, 6 in a middle school in the inner city, 2 in a predominantly poor income Hispanic area, high school level. And I learned that students in difficult situations, in difficult, challenging environments, whether it's the inner city, whether it's in other areas where perhaps English is limited and is not even spoken at home, if engaged, students will actually respond. I am a believer, and it influences what we do in the clinic and what I do with our students, that anything, any subject matter can be taught to any student as long as you understand your audience. So the first thing that I do in class is I don't assume anything. Our students work, not because they want to, but in most of the cases, they have to. I remember myself, when I graduated college, I did have an opportunity of actually attending the University of Miami for my first 2 degrees, and my colleagues their problems were very different than mine. You know, I remember going home and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, that 2% that was mentioned earlier today, that was us. We weren't really quite sure if we were going to have food on the table the next month or the next week. And that was, you know, greatly impactful. And yet, at the University of Miami, just so you know, it's a private institution. So I believe that we can teach anything at any level. And then I discovered this, right? Jerome Bruner. And many of you are aware. And this is exactly what I experienced with the students. When we reached out to SunTrust, one of the main characteristics of our grant proposal was the fact that we were going to work with the National Academy Foundation, which is actually a nonprofit, and they work throughout the nation, and they basically help prepare students for college and career. And the students that actually are participants in this academy, these are not the privileged kids. These are not the kids that actually did extremely well in the AP courses and were actually allowed to participate in these. No, these are the regular rank and file students, the students that we have at FIU and that you have at GSU, the ones that have actually experienced inequality in education, the ones that actually live challenging lives. And so these students are the ones that you see in the video. These are the students that we engage in the community as well. Okay? Our role is to not just present them with the subject matter. Our role is to understand where they're coming from. Our role is to know that these kids, like us, before them, were unaware, perhaps, how it is that education happens. How is it that we learn? How we become lifelong learners because we already have those building blocks set, a solid foundation that allows us to actually continue to elevate ourselves and succeed in life. And so this is what we instill. What we encountered at the high schools, we instruct these students not as an extracurricular activity, but the district is so excited about what's happening here that they have allowed us to instruct these students during their regular class time. So when they're actually meeting with their business teachers, we will go in there at that time because this is too important to deliver after school. We have to deliver this during the school day. And these are the kids that we are actually making an impact on. So we looked at the curriculum, and sometimes curriculums are dated or it's very theory-based. How many of you learn a software just by reading the manual? We don't do that, right? We do it by basically doing, by learning, by just working on it. So this is what we do with our kids. We want to create that deep understanding of the subject matter. We want to make sure that that foundation is solid so that they're able to build upon that even when we're not around. Finally, I'm not going to go over an example that I had, but I do want to mention one thing. I have been asked to head a committee, a national committee, on basically post-secondary education and student success. And this is the organization NAF. This would not have happened without the support of the SunTrust Foundation. And what they want us to do is to share the model, our model that we basically are using in Dade County with the rest of the nation, and actually even make it better so that we're able to reach students in a scale that is beyond what we envisioned originally. And by doing this and making our communities stronger, we make our nation stronger as well. And we help those students. Yesterday's story, Austin's story, what a beautiful story, right? Austin, this poor kid, everything. He loses his father at 14. And there he is talking to Bill Gates, telling him how to use the chat function. What a beautiful thing. And so our students can succeed. Our goal is to equip them to succeed. It's not enough to graduate from college, but we need to make sure that you are actually equipped with the skill set that is required of you in this 21st century workforce. And adaptability is one of those key components as well. And it all begins with a deep foundation and an understanding, at least at a pedagogical level, that we shouldn't offer these students anything less than a first-rate education. All we have to do is make sure we understand our audience. Thank you very much. I believe we have 4 minutes, so that's good. Do we have any questions on anything that we've covered today? Yes, sir. Okay, when we work with the high schools, that is the case with the high schools. At FIU, as far as the internal community is concerned, no, it's mostly students from all different areas, all different disciplines. These students in these academies have actually chosen, I wouldn't say chosen because they're too young perhaps, but they've actually, they have an inclination towards business. And what we've done is we've looked at what they're doing and we've basically fused it and we complement what's being done in the classroom, perhaps with more practical exercises where we're actually digging deep and making sure that they establish that foundation. Yes, sir. As we showed, usually these sessions run, a module will run 8 sessions, and they're each about an hour and a half. So we actually do spend some time with the students many times, and this is at the school site as well. Then many of them come back to us. Imagine many of them become Bloomberg, certified at FIU. They come and they actually continue. We have a student, Michael Almeida, who is a student from one of the high schools, Southwest High School, and I met this young man a year ago, and I said, well, how would you like to, knowing what I feel is the truth about education, I said, why don't you come and join my class? Why don't you come to my class and actually participate with our students? This young man, actually comes to my class, which is at 5 o'clock. So his high school lets out at 2:30 or so. He comes to our school after high school on Thursdays. He participates in the class. He did all the work, and more importantly, he actually, he was successful. And many of the students, the last day of class, when they realized that one of their colleagues was actually a high school student, were actually quite, they couldn't believe it. I don't know if they felt bad for themselves or what that was, but again, it's just a matter of understanding your audience. And if a student doesn't get something, like I didn't get something, there's a good possibility it's because it wasn't presented properly. And we, as in pedagogy, we have to be aware of that. What other questions do we have?
Yes.
I
have one. Hi. Do you have curriculum for the college students that maybe get credit for the curriculum?
So we have the curriculum for the high school students. For the college students, remember, the engagement with the college students is a different level, different type of engagement. Our goal is to reach our community at all levels, right? So the curriculum that we're utilizing for the internal community for the college students, it's more focused on different modules. As I explained, it could be on credit, on student debt, right? It could be on credit card debt. It could be about budgeting. So these are the types of modules. And these are self-contained modules that are delivered at the SunTrust FIU Financial Wellness Clinic. And they're actually, they're sequential. They're consecutive. We offer them on a rotating basis. The students know when they can attend. But we also offer more advanced topics as well to students that are interested. So for example, we did one in VBA, the programming language in Excel. So at the SunTrust Clinic, we're offering from basic budgeting 101 to students that are coming in, internal students, college students that want to receive like training in advanced Excel skills for business, right? So we cover the gamut like that. Yes? You know, I think one of the challenges and one of the surprises for us when we first started going to these high schools is that teachers do not get the support that they deserve. And by that I mean this. I'm not just referring to monetary support. It's ridiculous what teachers get paid to do what they do. When I teach a class, I teach a class. The most I'll teach is one class a day, and it's usually 2 classes a week. And after class, I'm tired. I could just imagine how it must be when you're teaching 6 classes a day, every day, 5 days a week, and dealing with discipline issues that we don't have at the college level. So one of the challenges we faced was a lot of the teachers were not prepared accordingly in order to be able to deliver the curriculum that they've been tasked to do effectively. So we reached out to the teachers, to the high school teachers of the schools that we work with, and we said to them, you are as important as the students. And Kathy alluded to this earlier. So we've held a series of workshops, day-long workshops at the FIU, the SunTrust FIU clinic, where we actually work solely with teachers. And it's okay if you don't understand something. Let's go ahead and do this. And again, it goes back to this. You know, in many cases, these teachers were not properly trained, and it's not their fault. And so we're there to help them as well. I think we're...
Hi, I'm curious.
You're cutting me off, but we have one last question.
I'm sorry.
So, go ahead.
I'm curious about your participation rate on campus. I'm at a community college. We have 75% part-time student attendance or enrollment. And so in trying to have something like this start up, how do you get students engaged and come into participate in some of the modules that you have?
You know, that's a bit of a challenge at times because you're right, our students are mostly commuters. Many of them also hold jobs. The majority of them hold jobs, as mentioned earlier. We use the marketing arm of the College of Business to promote many of these sessions. So we try to use the resources that are already available to us so that we can at least create awareness. And then hopefully we'll have referrals, and the students will actually refer others to come and participate as well. So, all right, I know that they're going to not be happy if I take any more questions, but thank you all. We will be around for the rest of the day. So if you